Admiral Kevin Marshall stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel, Starward Hope, watching the blue and green planet of Volantis Prime grow larger through the viewing window. After 30 years of service to the Galactic Council, humanity was finally going to receive what they had been promised. The Orion Corridor, a stretch of space containing 12 fertile worlds, would become humanity's new home among the stars. Kevin was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. He had seen too many battles, buried too many friends, and spent too many nights wondering if the sacrifices were worth it. But today, he allowed himself to feel hope. Today, everything would change. Lieutenant Maria Santos looked up from her communication console. She was young, barely 30, with dark hair pulled back in a tight braid. Her eyes were bright with excitement. "Sir, we're receiving the formal transmission from the council chambers. They're ready to begin the ceremony." Kevin nodded and straightened his uniform. "Put it on the main screen." The viewing window flickered and transformed into a holographic display showing the Grand Council chambers. The room was massive, built from white stone that seemed to glow with inner light. Representatives from 40 different species sat in rising tiers around a central platform where the High Council presided. Councillor Zethric spoke first. He was Kelvari, an insectoid creature with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected light like black diamonds. His voice clicked and buzzed, but the translation software made his words clear. "We gather today to honor the humans of Earth, who have served the Council faithfully for 3 decades. Kevin watched as images appeared beside Zethric's, showing human soldiers fighting alongside Council forces against the Vractal Raiders. He remembered those battles well. The Vractal were savage creatures who attacked colony worlds without warning, killing everyone they found. Humanity had lost 12,000 soldiers, pushing them back beyond the galactic rim. The humans shared their agricultural technology freely, Zethrix continued. More images appeared, showing Earth scientists working on barren worlds, teaching alien farmers how to grow crops in difficult soil. They ended famines on 12 worlds and asked for nothing in return. Maria wiped a tear from her eye. Kevin pretended not to notice. They had all lost people in those early years, when humanity was desperate to prove themselves worthy of membership in the galactic community. Ambassador. Patricia Lane appeared on screen next. She was humanity's representative on the council, a former teacher who had become a diplomat through sheer determination and intelligence. Her silver hair was styled simply, and she wore the traditional blue robes of her office. "On behalf of Earth and all human colonies," Patricia said, her voice steady and proud, "I accept the Council's recognition of our contributions. We look forward to building our new homes in the Orion Corridor and continuing our partnership with all Council species." High Arbiter Thiessen rose from his seat at the center of the High Council platform. He was ancient, his species among the founders of the Council over 10,000 years ago. His body was humanoid but covered in scales that shifted color with his emotions. Right now, they were a calm blue. "The documentation has been prepared," Thiessen announced. "Let the territorial assignments be displayed for all to witness." A holographic map appeared in the center of the chamber, showing the boundaries of human space. Kevin leaned forward, eager to see the Orion Corridor marked in Earth's colors. But something was wrong. The map showed human territory, but not in the Orion Corridor. Instead, the boundaries enclosed a region called the Ashen Drift, a worthless stretch of dead space filled with barren rocks and dying stars. There were no fertile worlds there, no resources worth harvesting, nothing but darkness and dust. "There must be a mistake," Kevin said quietly. Maria was already checking her console. "Sir, the official documents are coming through now." They matched the display. "We've been assigned the Ashen Drift." Kevin felt his stomach drop. "Contact Ambassador Lane immediately. Private channel." Patricia's face appeared on a small screen to Kevin's left. Her composure was cracking, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Kevin, I don't understand. This isn't what we agreed to. This isn't what they promised." "I know," Kevin said. "Request clarification. There has to be an explanation." Patricia turned and addressed High Arbiter Thiessen directly. "With respect, High Arbiter, the documents show the Ashen Drift, not the Orion Corridor. Has there been an administrative error? Theson's scales shifted to a pale yellow, a color Kevin had learned meant dismissal or contempt. There is no error, Ambassador. The Orion Corridor has been reassigned to the Fenlori Collective. They have greater need of those resources. Greater need? Patricia's voice rose, despite her efforts to stay calm. The Fenlori already controls 17 star systems. They have more territory than any other species in the Council. Humanity has been waiting 30 years for these worlds. Our people died defending Council space, with the understanding that we would receive the Orion Corridor. Your people died serving the Council, as all member species serve, Thesan replied. His voice was cold, ancient, utterly without sympathy. The Council determines resource allocation based on overall galactic needs, not individual species' expectations. Humans are adaptable. You will make do with what you have been given. Kevin watched Patricia struggle to respond. Around her, the other council members sat in silence. Some looked uncomfortable, but none spoke in humanity's defense. The Kelvari, whose worlds humanity had protected from the Vractal, studied their datapads. The Thesari, who had been saved from famine by Earth's agricultural programs, whispered among themselves but said nothing aloud. This is a violation of our agreement, Patricia said finally. We have documentation, recordings, promises made by this very council. Promises are not treaties, Thesan said. The council makes decisions based on current circumstances, not past discussions. If humanity wishes to dispute this decision, you may file a formal complaint through the standard arbitration process. Processing time is currently estimated at 47 years. 47 years. Kevin did the math in his head. He would be dead before a complaint was even reviewed. The transmission ended without further ceremony. The viewing window returned to showing Volantis Prime, now a world that seemed cold and hostile rather than beautiful. Maria Santos sat frozen at her console. Sir, what do we do? Kevin didn't answer immediately. He walked to the window and stared out at the stars, the same stars humanity had dreamed about for centuries. They had worked so hard to reach them, sacrificed so much to earn their place among the galactic community, and it had all been for nothing. We go home, Kevin said finally. We tell our people what happened, and then we figure out what comes next. As the starward hope turned away from Volantis' prime and began the long journey back to Earth. Kevin Marshall made a silent promise. Humanity had been patient. Humanity had been cooperative. Humanity had done everything asked of them, and more. That approach had failed. It was time to find another way. Behind him, Maria Santos began recording a detailed report of everything that had transpired. Somewhere, clock started counting down toward a reckoning that the Galactic Council could never have imagined. The stars watched in silence, as they always had. Indifferent to the ambitions and betrayals of the species that traveled between them. But change was coming, carried in the hearts of a species that had learned the hardest lesson the galaxy had to teach. That trust, given freely, could be used as a weapon against those foolish enough to offer it. 6 months had passed since the betrayal at Volantis Prime, and things had only grown worse. Commander Daniel Price guided his shuttle through the atmosphere of Haven's Rest, colony world where 50,000 human settlers had built their lives over 2 generations. What he saw through the cockpit window made his heart sink. The northern continent, once covered in forests that the colonists had carefully cultivated over decades, now lay flat and scarred. Massive machines crawled across the landscape like metal insects, ripping up trees and digging into the earth. Rivers that had once run clear and blue were now gray with industrial waste. The Morthax swarm, said Corporal Linda Hayes, sitting beside Daniel in the co-pilot seat. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a quick mind, one of the best soldiers Daniel had ever served with. The Council declared Haven's Rest a shared resource zone 3 weeks ago, gave the Morthax permission to strip mine the entire northern hemisphere. Daniel gripped the controls tighter. Did the colonists receive any warning? Any offer of relocation assistance? Nothing, Linda replied. They woke up one morning to find Morthax ships in orbit. By the time they contacted Earth for help, the mining had already begun. The shuttle landed near the colonial capital, a small city called New Portland that the settlers had built with their own hands over 40 years. What should have been a thriving community now looked like a refugee camp. Tents and temporary shelters filled the streets, and people wandered with dazed expressions on their faces. A man approached as Daniel stepped off the shuttle. He was older, maybe 60, with weathered skin and calloused hands that spoke of a lifetime of hard work. "Commander Price? I'm Gregory Palmer, Colony Administrator. Thank you for coming." Daniel shook his hand. "What's the situation on the ground?" Gregory led them through the crowded streets, explaining as they walked. The Morthax gave us 48 hours to evacuate the northern settlements. 48 hours for 12,000 people to leave homes they'd spent their whole lives building. We couldn't get everyone out in time. The machines just rolled right over the settlements that were still occupied. "Casualties?" Daniel asked, though he dreaded the answer. 217 dead, mostly elderly who couldn't move fast enough, and the medical staff who refused to leave them behind. Gregory's voice broke slightly. "They sent a bill afterward for the cost of removing the bodies from the mining zone. They charged you for recovering your own dead. The council calls it administrative processing, standard procedure for shared resource zones." Gregory laughed bitterly. "We've been paying taxes to the council for 40 years, building infrastructure, following their regulations, contributing to the galactic economy, and this is what we get in return." Back on Earth, the situation was being discussed at the highest levels. Admiral Kevin Marshall sat in a secure briefing room at Earth Defense Command, watching a live feed from Haven's Rest while Dr. Samuel Grant presented his findings to the gathered military leaders and politicians. Samuel was a historian by training, a quiet man who had spent his career studying alien civilizations and their interactions with each other. He had gray hair and thick glasses, and he spoke with the careful precision of someone who chose every word deliberately. "What's happening on Haven's Rest is not an isolated incident," Samuel said, advancing through a series of holographic displays. "Over the past 10 years, I have documented 237 separate treaty violations committed against humanity by council member species." The room was silent as Samuel continued. "Agricultural technology we shared freely has been patented by Fenlori corporations. They'll now charge us licensing fees to use our own innovations. Mining rights we were promised have been sold to other species. Trade agreements have been modified without our consent or even our knowledge." Prime Minister Catherine Moore leaned forward in her seat. She was a practical woman who had risen to power on promises of building stronger relationships with the council. Those promises now seemed impossibly naive. "Why weren't we informed of this earlier?" "Because every time we filed a complaint, we were told to wait," Samuel replied. "To be patient. To trust the process. The arbitration system is designed to take decades, during which time the violations continue and become established facts. By the time our complaints are reviewed, the damage is permanent and irreversible." Kevin Marshall spoke up. "I've lodged 17 formal protests about Haven's Rest alone. The council hasn't acknowledged a single one. They've actually frozen our communication privileges for being disruptive. What are our options?" Catherine asked Samuel, removed his glasses, and cleaned them slowly, a habit he had when he was about to say something he knew people wouldn't want to hear. "The council views us as a young species, Prime Minister. Easily managed, easily manipulated. They gave us just enough to keep us cooperative while systematically stripping away everything of value. They will continue doing this until there's nothing left to take." "You still haven't answered my question, Doctor. What are our options?" Samuel put his glasses back on and looked directly at her. "We stop playing by their rules. We stop filing complaints that will never be heard. We stop asking for permission to exist." He paused. "We start demanding the respect that we have earned through blood and sacrifice." The room erupted in arguments. Some demanded caution, warning that humanity couldn't afford to anger the council. Others supported Samuel's position, insisting that caution had already failed. Kevin Marshall remained silent, watching the debate unfold. Later that night, Kevin stood alone on the observation deck of Earth's Defense Command, looking up at the stars. His communicator buzzed with a message from Commander Daniel Price on Haven's Rest. Sir, the situation here is getting worse. The Morthacs are expanding their operations into the southern continent now. The colonists want to fight back, but I've told them to wait for orders. Daniel's voice was strained with barely controlled anger. What should I tell them, sir? How long are we supposed to keep waiting? Kevin thought about the faces he had seen in the refugee camps, the children who had lost their homes, the elderly who had died because the council deemed their lives less important than mineral extraction quotas. Tell them help is coming, Kevin said finally. Tell them Earth hasn't forgotten them, and tell them that patience has an expiration date. He ended the call and returned to watching the stars. Somewhere out there, the council was celebrating another successful resource extraction. They had no idea that the species they had spent decades exploiting was beginning to consider a different response than quiet acceptance. The Galactic Council had made many mistakes in their long history, but the greatest mistake was assuming that humanity would simply accept their fate. They had confused human patience for weakness, human cooperation for submission. That confusion would cost them everything. Meridian Station floated at the crossroads of a dozen trade routes, a massive structure of metal and glass where species from across the galaxy came to conduct business. For humans, it represented their largest commercial presence outside Earth's solar system, a hub where merchants and traders worked to build economic connections with the wider galaxy. Captain Amy Richardson commanded the small security detachment assigned to protect human interests on the station. She was a woman of medium height, with short brown hair and calm gray eyes that rarely showed what she was thinking. She had served in the Earth Defense Force for 15 years, working her way up through the ranks through competence and determination, rather than political connections. On the morning that would change everything, Amy was reviewing supply manifests in her small office when her communications officer burst through the door. Ensign Gregory Palmer was young, barely 22, with the eager energy of someone who still believed the universe made sense. Captain, we have a problem, Gregory said. The Fenlori have seized 3 of our cargo ships. Amy set down her datapad. On what grounds? They're claiming the medical supplies we were shipping to the outer colonies contain restricted biological compounds. It's a lie, Captain. Those supplies were inspected and certified before they left Earth. Amy followed Gregory to the security center, where Chief Engineer Rosa Martinez and Communications Specialist Henry Ford were monitoring the situation. Rosa was a stocky woman with grease-stained hands and an expression that suggested she had seen everything and was impressed by nothing. Henry was thin and nervous, but his skill with communication systems was unmatched. Show me what's happening, Amy ordered. Henry pulled up a display showing the 3 cargo vessels surrounded by Fenlor warships. They're being towed to a Fenlor inspection facility. The crews have been confined to quarters, and all communication with them has been cut off. This is piracy, Rosa muttered. Those supplies are meant for the Henderson colony. Without them, people will die. Amy contacted the station's council representative, a Thessari official named Vorn, who was responsible for mediating disputes. The Thessari were supposed to be neutral, but Vorn's response made it clear where his loyalties actually lay. The Fenlori are operating within their rights under council trade regulations, Vorn said, his voice flat and uninterested. If you wish to dispute the seizure, you may file a complaint through proper channels. Those proper channels take years, Amy replied, struggling to keep her voice level. People in the outer colonies need those supplies now. That is not my concern, Vorn said, and ended the transmission. Before Amy could decide on her next move, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Henry's face went pale as he checked his screens. Captain, 3 Arbiter vessels just dropped out of hyperspace. They're hailing us. The Arbiters were the Council's enforcement arm, warships crewed by soldiers from a dozen different species, tasked with maintaining order throughout Council space. They answered only to the High Council itself, and their authority was absolute. The lead vessel's commander appeared on screen, a reptilian creature with golden eyes and a voice like grinding stone. Human Security Detachment, you are ordered to surrender your weapons and submit to inspection. Failure to comply will result in sanctions against your species. Amy felt her heart racing, but her voice remained steady. On what charges? Your presence on the station has been deemed a security risk. All human personnel will be detained pending investigation. Rosa leaned close to Amy and whispered, "If they search our systems, they'll find everything. The intelligence files, the documentation of council corruption, everything Dr. Grant has been collecting. It'll all be destroyed and will disappear into some arbiter detention facility." Amy understood immediately. For months, Earth had been quietly gathering evidence of council violations, building a case that might one day force change. That evidence was stored in Meridian stations, secure servers, waiting to be transmitted to Earth when the time was right. If the Arbiters took control, all of it would be lost. Amy said quietly, "Can you get a priority message to Earth?" "I can try, but the Arbiters are jamming most frequencies. It'll be a weak signal, and I can't guarantee it'll get through." "Wait. Tell them everything that's happening here. Send all the intelligence files through whatever channels are still open." Amy turned to Gregory. "Power up our defense grid." Gregory stared at her. "Captain, you're not seriously thinking of fighting? Those are Arbiter vessels. We have 1 defense platform and 30 security personnel." "I'm thinking of buying time," Amy replied. "Every minute we hold them off is another minute for Henry to get that message through." She activated the station-wide communication system. "All human personnel, this is Captain Richardson. We are about to come under attack by Council forces. I am not ordering anyone to fight. Those who wish to surrender may do so, and I will not think less of you. But I will not let them take everything we've worked for without resistance." The response came from across the station. Merchants who had never held a weapon reported to the armory. Engineers rigged the defense systems for maximum output. Traders transmitted their own records of council violations through personal channels. Adding to the flood of data streaming toward Earth, the Arbiter commander grew impatient. "You have 1 minute to comply. This is your final warning." Amy looked at her team. Rosa was already at the engineering console, rerouting power to the shields. Henry was transmitting furiously, his fingers flying across his controls. Gregory stood at the weapon station, his young face set with determination. "Open a channel," Amy said. When the Arbiter commander appeared on screen, she spoke clearly so there would be no misunderstanding. "This is Captain Amy Richardson of the Earth Defense Force. We refuse your unlawful order. If you want this station, you'll have to take it." The Arbiter vessels opened fire. The battle was brutal and one-sided. But Meridian Station's defenders fought with everything they had. Rosa kept the shields operating far beyond their designed limits, rerouting power from non-essential systems and somehow holding the defense grid together through sheer willpower. Gregory fired the station's weapons with precision, targeting the Arbiter vessel's sensor arrays and communication systems, and Henry kept transmitting, even as explosions rocked the station around him. Every file, every piece of evidence, every documentation of Council betrayal streamed toward Earth in a desperate flood of data. The battle lasted 3 hours. By the time Earth reinforcements arrived, responding to Henry's distress signal, 2 Arbiter vessels had been destroyed and a 3rd was crippled. The station was barely functional, fires burning in multiple sections. But it had not fallen. Captain Amy Richardson stood on the damaged bridge, surrounded by exhausted defenders who had never expected to survive. When the Earth vessels appeared on screen, when she heard Admiral Kevin Marshall's voice asking for a status report, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. "The station is secure," Admiral Amy reported, "and the data transmission was successful. Earth has everything." There was a long pause before Kevin responded. "Captain Richardson, what you did today will be remembered. Humanity just showed the Council something they never expected to see." "What's that, sir?" "That we're done being victims." The news of Meridian Station spread across human space like wildfire. For the first time in 30 years, humanity had fought back against Council forces and won. The victory was small, the cost was high, but it proved something that many had begun to doubt. Humans could fight, and when they chose to, they could win. The Galactic Council declared humanity a species of concern and imposed trade sanctions. But the damage was already done. The evidence gathered at Meridian Station exposed decades of corruption and exploitation. And the image of a single human defense force holding off? Arbiter warships inspired millions who had grown tired of accepting their fate in silence. A line had been drawn in the stars. The council had to decide how they would respond. They chose poorly. The Great Assembly Hall in Geneva had been built to hold thousands. But it had never been this full. Representatives from every Earth nation stood shoulder to shoulder with delegates from the outer colonies. Mining outposts and research stations scattered across human space. For the first time in history, all of humanity had gathered in one place to decide their collective future. Admiral Kevin Marshall stood at the central podium, looking out at the sea of faces. He saw anger there and fear, but also something else. Something that had been missing for too long. Unity. 3 months ago, Kevin began, Captain Amy Richardson and 30 security personnel held Meridian Station against 3 Arbiter warships. They were outgunned, outmatched, and facing impossible odds. They chose to fight anyway. He let those words settle before continuing. The council expected us to condemn Captain Richardson for her defiance. They expected us to apologize, to beg for forgiveness, to return to our role as obedient servants. Instead, we promoted her to commander and gave her a medal. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. The council responded by declaring us a species of concern. They imposed trade sanctions that have crippled our outer colonies. They have frozen our assets in council banks and revoked our travel privileges to core worlds. Kevin's voice hardened. They expected these measures to bring us to our knees. They were wrong. He stepped aside to allow General Victoria Ellis to take the podium. Victoria was a tall woman with iron-gray hair and the bearing of someone who had spent 40 years preparing for a war she hoped would never come. She activated a holographic display showing the tactical situation across human space. For the past 30 years, we have built our military according to council specifications, Victoria explained. We followed their rules, accepted their limitations, constructed ships designed to support council operations rather than defend our own interests. Our official fleet is adequate, but unremarkable. She changed the display, and gasps echoed through the hall. This is what the council doesn't know about. The hologram now showed shipyards hidden in asteroid fields, research stations concealed in the depths of gas giants, and manufacturing facilities buried beneath the surfaces of supposedly uninhabitable moons. While we smiled and cooperated, our scientists have been developing technologies that exceed anything the council possesses. The display zoomed in on a sleek warship unlike anything the Assembly had seen before. The Fury-class battlecruiser. Faster than any vessel in the council fleet. Armed with weapons that can penetrate Arbiter shields. And equipped with defensive systems that make Meridian Station's survival look like child's play. We have 47 of them operational, with another 100 under construction. Victoria paused to let the information sink in. We didn't build these ships because we wanted war. We built them because we understood something the council never bothered to learn about us. Humans don't survive by trusting others to protect us. We survive by being prepared to protect ourselves. Dr. Samuel Grant came forward next. The historian who had documented council violations for decades now stood before his entire species. Ready to deliver a message he had been preparing his whole life? I have spent 40 years studying the species of this galaxy, Samuel said. I have learned their languages, their histories, their cultures, and their methods. And I have reached one inescapable conclusion. They do not respect us because they do not fear us. He adjusted his glasses and continued. The council has existed for 10,000 years. In that time, they have absorbed or destroyed every species that challenged their authority. They believe they understand how civilizations behave, how they respond to pressure, how they can be manipulated and controlled. Samuel's voice grew stronger. But humans are not like other species. We spent 10,000 years fighting among ourselves before we ever reached the stars. We have survived plagues that killed half our population, wars that devastated entire continents, catastrophes that should have ended us a dozen times over. The council thinks they know war. They know nothing. The assembly was silent, hanging on every word. I am not calling for violence, Samuel clarified. I am calling for truth. The truth is that the Council sees us as resources to be exploited, not partners to be respected. The truth is that cooperation only works when both sides honor their commitments. The truth is that we have been patient for 30 years, and our patience has been rewarded with betrayal after betrayal. Prime Minister Catherine Moore took the podium last. She had aged visibly in the months since the crisis began, the weight of impossible decisions leaving its mark on her features. But her voice was steady as she addressed her people. "I came to this office believing in diplomacy," Catherine said. "I believed that reasonable beings could always find common ground, that compromise was always possible, that peace was always preferable to conflict. I still believe these things." She looked out at the assembly with eyes that held both sorrow and resolve. "But I also believe that there are times when diplomacy has been exhausted, when compromise becomes surrender, when peace becomes submission. We have reached such a time." Catherine outlined humanity's demands: full sovereignty over all territories promised to them, compensation for decades of treaty violations, equal representation in galactic governance, and immediate withdrawal of all sanctions. She gave the Council 30 days to respond. "If these demands are not met," Catherine concluded, "humanity will withdraw from the Galactic Council permanently. Any attempt to enforce sanctions or seize human territories will be considered an act of war and will be met with appropriate force." The vote was taken that same day. Every nation, every colony, every outpost voted the same way. For the first time in human history, their species spoke with a single voice. The message was transmitted across every frequency, every language known to the galaxy. It was simple and direct, leaving no room for misunderstanding. Humanity was done asking for permission to exist. The Council's response came 3 days later. High Arbiter Thiessen himself delivered it, his ancient face displaying the contempt. He felt for the upstart species that dared challenge the established order. "The humans have made their choice," Thiessen announced to the assembled Council. "They have rejected our generous offers of resolution and chosen the path of defiance. Very well. We shall teach them the same lesson we have taught every species that forgot their place in this galaxy." He authorized the formation of a combined fleet, drawing ships from 12 Council species. It would be the largest armada ever assembled in galactic history, an overwhelming force designed not just to defeat humanity, but to serve as a warning to every other species that might consider rebellion. "When we are finished," Thiessen declared, "Earth will burn, and humanity will learn the price of defiance. They will become an example that will be remembered for 10,000 years." The fleet gathered at the edge of human space, hundreds of warships representing the military might of species that had dominated the galaxy since before humans had learned to use fire. They were confident in their superiority, certain of their victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them on Earth. Admiral Kevin Marshall received reports of the approaching armada and began final preparations. The hidden fleet emerged from its concealment, joining the official defense force in a display of military power that would have seemed impossible just months before. Kevin looked at the tactical display showing humanity's defenses and the overwhelming force arrayed against them, felt fear, but also something stronger. Pride in his species, in their refusal to accept a fate imposed by others, in their willingness to risk everything for the right to determine their own future. "All ships," Kevin broadcast, "the enemy is coming. They outnumber us, and they believe that numbers alone will decide this battle. Let's show them how wrong they are." The final battle for human space was about to begin. The Council fleet emerged. From hyperspace, like a swarm of angry insects, hundreds of warships spreading across the void in perfect formation. High Arbiter Thiessen watched from the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Justice, as his forces took their positions around human space. He felt nothing but contempt for the species that had dared to challenge Council authority. "Begin transmission," Thiessen ordered. His scales shifted to a deep red, the color of righteous anger in his species. "Let them see what awaits them." The transmission showed the full extent of the Council armada, ship after ship arranged in battle formation. It was a display of overwhelming power, designed to break human morale before a single shot was fired. "Humans of Earth," Thiessen announced, "you stand against the combined might of the Galactic Council. Your defiance ends today. Surrender now, and some of you may be permitted to survive as a lesson to other species who might consider rebellion. Resist, and you will be erased from existence. Admiral Kevin Marshall stood on the bridge of the Defiant Spirit, surrounded by officers who had trained their entire lives for a moment they hoped would never arrive. Commander Amy Richardson commanded. Her own vessel now, the Relentless leading a squadron of fast attack ships on the fleet's flank. Commander Daniel Price coordinated the defense of the inner colonies from his position aboard the Guardian Shield. Kevin studied the tactical display, comparing the enemy numbers to his own forces. 3-to-1 odds, at least. The Council fleet included vessels from species that had been waging war for millennia, crewed by soldiers who had never known defeat. But Kevin also saw something the Council had never considered. He saw the hidden shipyards that had built humanity's secret fleet. He saw the research stations that had developed weapons and shields beyond anything the galaxy had seen. He saw 30 years of preparation, of planning, of refusing to accept the future the Council had planned for them. Open a channel to all ships, Kevin ordered. When the connection was established, he spoke to every human vessel in the fleet. This is Admiral Marshall. Enemy before us represents everything we have fought against for 30 years. See us as primitives, as resources to be exploited, as a problem to be solved through an overwhelming force. He paused, letting his words reach every officer and crew member in the fleet. They have never faced humans who had nothing left to lose. They have never fought people who would rather die free than live as servants. Today, we show them what that means. Today, we show them why humanity will never kneel. The Council fleet advanced, confident in their superiority. They employed tactics that had crushed rebellions across thousands of years. Formations that had broken the defenses of 100 worlds. The first wave of missiles streaked toward the human defensive line. Enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The human shields held. Not just held, but absorbed the assault without wavering. Technology developed in secret laboratories far beyond anything the Council had predicted. And then the human fleet responded, the Fury class. Battlecruisers opened fire with weapons that cut through Council shields like paper. Missiles that tracked their targets with impossible precision found their marks despite every countermeasure. Within the first hour of combat, the Council had lost 30 ships without destroying a single human vessel. Thiessen stared at his tactical display in disbelief. This is impossible. How can they possess such technology? They are primitives. His flag captain, a Kelvari, veteran of a dozen campaigns, spoke hesitantly. High Arbiter, perhaps we should consider withdrawal and reassessment. The humans are not fighting as we expected. Withdrawal. Thiessen's scales flashed bright red. The Council does not retreat from primitives. All ships concentrate fire on their flagship. Kill their admiral, and the rest will collapse. The Eternal Justice led the charge toward the Defiant Spirit, accompanied by the most powerful vessels in the Council fleet. Kevin watched them come, understanding exactly what Thiessen intended. He's trying to cut off the head, Kevin observed. All ships execute maneuver Omega-7. The human fleet had practiced this maneuver 1,000 times in simulation, preparing for the moment when a superior enemy would target their command structure. Instead of protecting their flagship, the human vessels parted, allowing the Council ships to advance deep into their formation. Then they closed the trap. Fire converged from every direction, human vessels moving with coordination that seemed almost telepathic. The Kelvar ship that had accompanied Thiessen exploded under concentrated assault. The Fenlori cruiser that guarded his flank lost its engines and began drifting helplessly. One by one, the ships that had followed the High Arbiter into battle were destroyed or disabled. Commander, Amy Richardson led her squadron directly into the heart of the enemy formation. Her vessel, the Relentless, living up to its name. She saw an opportunity to strike at the Eternal Justice and took it without hesitation, driving her squadron through a gap in the Council defenses. All ships, focus on the flagship, Amy ordered. If we take out Thiessen, this fleet falls apart. The Relentless was not designed for a direct assault on a vessel the size of the Eternal Justice. It was fast and maneuverable, perfect for hit-and-run attacks. but its shields could not withstand sustained fire from such a powerful enemy. Amy knew this. She attacked anyway. Her weapons tore into the flagship's hull, targeting the bridge, the engine room, the weapon systems. She scored hit after hit, dodging return fire through maneuvers that pushed her ship and crew to their absolute limits. But there were too many guns, too many missiles, too much firepower directed at one small vessel. The Relentless took hit after hit, shields failing, hull breaching, systems collapsing one after another. "Captain," her pilot shouted, "we need to withdraw. The ship can't take much more." Amy looked at her tactical display. Behind her, 3 civilian transport ships were evacuating colonists from the battle zone. If she withdrew, the Council vessels pursuing her would shift their attention to those defenseless transports. Thousands of lives, mostly children and their families, would be lost. Negative, Amy said calmly. "Set collision course for the Eternal Justice. All hands, prepare for impact." Her crew didn't hesitate. They had followed her through Meridian Station, through months of preparation. Through the opening hours of this desperate battle, they would follow her now. The Relentless struck the Eternal Justice at full speed, its reactor overloading at the moment of impact. The explosion tore through the flagship's bridge, killing High Arbiter Thiessen instantly. His last words, recorded by surviving sensors, echoed through history. "We never understood them. That was our mistake." With their leader dead and their flagship destroyed, the Council fleet's coordination collapsed. What had been a unified force became a collection of individual ships, each fighting for survival rather than victory. The humans pressed their advantage ruthlessly, showing no mercy to an enemy that had offered none. The battle lasted 11 hours. When it ended, the Council fleet had been reduced to scattered survivors fleeing toward the safety of distant space. They carried stories of human pilots ramming enemy vessels rather than surrendering, of space stations self-destructing to prevent capture, of ordinary people fighting with improvised weapons when their military defenders fell. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. The Council, undefeated for 10,000 years, had been broken by a species they had dismissed as primitive newcomers. 1 year later, representatives from 37 species gathered on Earth to sign the new compact. The Galactic Council had collapsed in the aftermath of the battle, torn apart by internal conflicts as member species demanded explanations for the catastrophic defeat. Admiral Kevin Marshall, now chairman of the Earth Defense Coalition, addressed the assembly. "We did not want this war. We did not seek dominance. We simply refused to be dominated any longer." He looked at the alien dignitaries, some of whom had fought against humanity just months before. The old order was built on exploitation disguised as cooperation. This new order will be different, or it will not exist at all. The new compact established principles the old council had only pretended to uphold. Equal representation, regardless of species, age, or power. Binding arbitration for disputes. Automatic sanctions against any member that violated another's sovereignty. Dr. Samuel Grant, appointed as humanity's first ambassador to the compact, spent his remaining years ensuring the treaty's promises became reality. His final book, written shortly before his death, became required reading for generations of diplomats and leaders across the galaxy. "We learned the hardest lesson any species can learn," Samuel wrote. "That trust given freely can be used as a weapon against those foolish enough to offer it. We learned it through blood and fire and betrayal. But we also learned something about ourselves. When pushed to the edge of extinction, we did not become monsters. We became a family. And family protects its own. Memorial gardens across human space, monuments bear the names of those who fell. Children born after the war visit these places, learning not just of sacrifice, but of the moment humanity stopped asking for a place in the galaxy and started demanding one. Commander, Amy Richardson's name is carved largest of all, above a simple inscription that captures the spirit of everything humanity fought for. She gave everything so others could live free. The stars, once symbols of distant dreams, became reminders of what humans could achieve when united. And throughout the galaxy, species that once dismissed humanity as primitive newcomers learned to speak of them with respect, sometimes fear. but always acknowledgement. The Galactic Council's betrayal had been meant to keep humanity weak and compliant forever. Instead, it forged them into something stronger than anyone had imagined possible. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, not through patience or submission, but through the one thing their enemies never expected: the absolute refusal to be broken.